Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Mentoring Developers. This is a podcast for you if you are a new developer or you want to be a developer and you're not sure how to start and you think maybe you're not cut out for it. Maybe you are. You should keep watching and keep listening to this. Today, my guest is Guy Royse. Now, he has a very interesting story, and I really, really want you to hear his story and get some lessons out of it. He actually went into the prison system where he was teaching convicts programming, software development. That's a first. I've never heard that before. And for me, I'm really excited because I really want to know all the details of why he would do that, what was his experience like, and then we can get into what got him interested in this. Guy, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Fantastic. It's so good to finally be able to connect with you, but I'm really curious to know this prison story. What happened there?
Well, it all started in Tijuana. No, just kidding. um, it was a guy I worked with, a guy by the name of Dan Wiebe, ran this program at Marion Correctional Institute in Marion, Ohio, where he went in and he would teach inmates how to code. He was teaching them Java. They were doing TDD and all the agile practices that were that were very vogue at the time, and I think are still quite commonly used. They're just not news anymore. And this is just a program he was running, and and it was this thing that kind of grabbed me. It's a thing that I've always cared about a little bit. Cared about a lot, actually. There's prisoners are sort of people that are they're going to get out of prison someday, and when they get out, we don't want them to go back in. That's bad for society. If they get out and they commit crimes, they find themselves back in prison. And one of the main determiners of whether they commit recidivism, if they go back to prison, is if they can get a good job or any job. And if you're an ex-offender, if you've got a record, if you've been in prison, you've got a lot of uphill battles to getting jobs. Certain industries, they don't care. The blue collar world is very, very acclimated to the idea of hiring former prisoners. The white collar world isn't, but there's also an incredible demand for developers, right? And so it's like, well, if you could get a developer that was hungry, but from a really non-traditional background, i.e., I spent 10 years in prison. You could probably, as a company, there's a pragmatic thing there where you could save money, right? It's like, well, these people, they're hungry. You can bring them in at a lower rate to offset the increased risk of hiring them. But you can get a lot of benefit as a company hiring them. You can get a lot of benefit as a prisoner getting a job because, if you get a job making $40,000 a year as a developer right out of prison, that's a really good job out of prison. That's not working at Tim Hortons. That's not a food, service sector job. And so getting in there and helping them do these sorts of things is something that was really, it was a good way to be a part of the solution and teach things. And it's really cool. It was really cool going into the prison because the first time I went, it was we were doing what's called a coding in the clink. It's like a code retreat in prison.
Wow.
And you go in there and you go into the prison, you're walking and it's like there's bars everywhere. Not everywhere, but there's lots of bars and gates and stuff. But a lot of it had a real institutional feel. It actually reminded me of my elementary school, of all things. And we go back into the prison. I meet all these guys, and it's a little weird at first because it's like we're in a prison, and then you start coding, and then you're coding, and you're sitting there pairing with this man, and they were at different skill levels. And you forgot that you were in the prison. And I think that was actually a lot of the appeal for the prisoners who were learning to code in this program, is that they could forget that they were in prison for a while. They could just focus on their activity. But yeah, it was a great program. I was glad to participate in it. It's something that's, my father spent time in prison, and I've got other family members that spent time in prison. And so there's always been a little bit of you asked at the beginning why. And so this is sort of the why I want to do this, not just the practical things, but the sort of the emotional, empathetic trigger in me that makes me think this is a good idea. Uh, I learned early on that people in prison weren't just the bad guys, right? They weren't these people that were just undesirable and we're going to warehouse them away so we don't have to have them in our society. They were just people. And lots of them had made really big mistakes. A lot of them had regret. Um, I never felt unsafe there, um, which I think is interesting. Um, but they're just people. They're not good guys. They're not bad guys. They're just humans. And you know, you spend time in a prison and you realize you start thinking how many steps would have taken for me to find myself in this place, and not as a visitor, but as a guest. Yeah. and and you start thinking it's not that many steps. There's it's um, you could easily see it's like I could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I could hang out with the wrong people and make a couple of decisions, and next thing you know, oh wow, I'm in jail. I'm in court. I'm in prison. And then I get out, and I have bad job opportunities. And so let's
Yeah,
try
I
and help with
think
that.
this is so inspiring because we have millions of our citizens in this country, but
Yeah,
mostly, but around the world that are in prison. People have committed crimes. Sometimes they may not have committed a huge crime. Sometimes it's the laws that criminalize minor things. The
yeah,
reasons are not important. They're human beings, as you said, and they did some bad things. They probably did some good things as well, but now they're living their lives. So you're going in there, you're volunteering your time to teach them a skill that will equip them to be productive in society and be better. That's awesome. But I'm wondering because when I'm doing programming, right? Well, I'm teaching my kids. The first thing I need is the internet because you need to look up APIs, you need to look up documentation and a video of somebody doing it. I didn't think you could get internet in the prison. So how does that
you
work?
you can't.
So how does it work?
It turns out the compilers work just fine without the internet.
Ah,
Uh, and so I don't know how long you've been writing software, but I've been doing it for about 25, a little more than 25 years. And so early on in my career, it was all books. I didn't have the internet at the very beginning of my career. I had books, and I had the manuals that came with my tools. So I had like the C++, Borland's Turbo C++. Actually, I still got it back there on my shelf.
that's nice.
You can't see it really well because of the red lights, um,
I love
but
your
with
lights. I want those.
thanks,
I want lights like that. Let's talk about it
$35
after
on
this.
Amazon.
Yeah, I know, but but no, you made it
Yeah,
look good. All right, let's keep
but
going.
yeah, so you'd open it up, and then manuals would tell you how the language worked and tell you how the compiler worked, and you would learn things that way. And you had to do it the hard way, and then you memorize things. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
I had to learn things. I mean, we kind of use Google as a crutch,
we do.
right? Where it's like, what's that command to do this thing? I'll just Google it real quick. Oh yeah, there it is. Copy paste. There we go. And I'm
Yeah,
sort of just like using it as like an extra set of like extra memory banks.
right, right.
Um,
So they
and
just have
but
books and they have the APIs, the reference material over there. So
mhm.
which languages are you teaching them?
Well, I'll say past tense because we're not doing that program anymore.
Okay.
It was shut down, unfortunately. But in an episode that made international news, actually.
Oh, wow.
Uh, but no, we would start out when Dan was just teaching them Java,
Mm.
and then I came in and started teaching JavaScript. And so,
JavaScript without
yeah,
internet. That is obviously
yeah,
it works,
yeah.
but
Well,
it's a different thing for me. Because I could never imagine it. And you're right because we are spoiled. We just
yeah,
because JavaScript keeps changing, but it doesn't change as much. You could certainly do all
yeah.
of that. That's good.
Well, the consideration there, the reason we chose the languages we did was because we didn't know how long it was going to be between the training that we were giving them and their release.
Yeah.
And so some of the guys we were working with had sentenced 15 to life, 30 to life. It's like they might get out. Um, and when they did, we needed to make sure that there was a language they would be able to find a job in.
Yeah,
And Java and JavaScript are not going anywhere.
that's right.
It's Java's sort of. I'm probably going to anger some people here, but Java's the new COBOL, right? It's the enterprise language that's going to be there forever. Uh,
I agree
and
with you.
JavaScript's on that same path. Um, and so we felt these were good languages to focus on. It's
Yeah.
like, well, we could get, and there was, we would bring in. We had a thumb drive that we could bring in with code, and so we would load Git repos with like open source libraries and stuff like that on it.
Nice.
So they were able to actually get code and modern libraries in and stuff.
That is
And they had a
awesome.
network internally that they used, so they were able to do network programming. They just had to set up
Oh,
their own web servers and stuff.
I like it. At least somebody's thinking, because all of this infrastructure would have to be there. Someone would have brought it in, made some effort. So it's good to know
Yeah,
that it's not just a place where you just rot. It's you can to do something
yeah,
productive. That's good. That's awesome. And and then they would be able to practice, and hopefully even if it ends up being so that they never get out or they never get a job, you did your part. So that's really awesome.
yeah,
I appreciate that.
yeah. Well, some of them have gotten out since I was part of that program. It's been a few years since we participated in that program.
Mm.
There was another program in the prison that resulted in all of the computers being removed from the prison, which pretty much killed the program.
Oh wow.
Um,
Why?
yeah,
Like something bad happened?
yeah. Well, I don't know if I want to spend the whole time telling the story, but it is a good story.
I want to know the story. Let's hear
Yeah,
the
I think
story.
everyone's going to want to know. So, what happened at the prison, and you can Google the story. It was on The Verge and everything. It made BBC. Um, what happened is there was a computer recycling program,
Mm.
not to recycle the parts, but to like find the steel and the gold and those sorts of things.
Oh.
To get the recyclable materials out of old computers.
Mm.
And some of the inmates that were in that program, completely unrelated to the program I worked with, uh, cobbled together two PCs and got them on the prison network by wiring them in via Ethernet.
Mm.
And then they got one of the correction officer's credentials and was able to use it to get onto the internet and to get onto the prison network as well.
Wow.
And so they got into the ODRC's network and found inmates that were very young and didn't have any credit, but had like really long sentences, and started opening credit cards in their name and sending them out to drop boxes out in the outside world. People pick up the cards, max them out, lather, rinse, repeat. Uh,
Oh wow.
and it all came down. They were getting away with. They were hiding it. It's like it all came down because they decided to download pornography using this correction officer's credentials to distribute within the prison as contraband. And the corrections officer said, "Hey, dude, why are you looking at this stuff at work?" His boss came to him,
Oh.
and he's like, "What are you talking about? I'm not doing that." And they looked at the logs and found out he wasn't even in the prison when it happened. And then they started investigating and found it out. And so once they found that the group that was doing that, they shut down anything computer related in the prison, and our program ended. So, but it's really, I mean, in some ways, it was really clever, right?
It is.
Yeah, props for the cleverness and the ingenuity, which you see a lot in prisons. People can be very resourceful
Yeah.
because they just don't have a lot to work with. Um,
That is a
but
very interesting story. But there are characters everywhere. But when you were in prison, you don't have as many rights, so it's easy to
yeah,
lose rights. But again, I understand uh, both points of view. But
yeah,
I hope that we find a way to offer these services, programming, computer services, and teaching these types of skills to all people, including our present population, but also minorities, also women and children. Even everybody should know, get a little taste of this. And it's not for everybody,
Yeah.
but for some people, it would be the right thing. So,
Well, it's that's part of the point of education in a way. Touch a lot of things and see what sticks.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Does this grab your interest? Check that out. You know, um, and that's why you have that diverse education.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. I took a bunch of music class in school. I don't have any interest in being a musician, but lots of
But
people took it, and then they at the very least have a
they did,
hobby that
yeah.
they've maintained their entire life.
Yeah. I have a
Uh,
lot of interest, and I have been learning on my own, and I am a pretty bad musician,
yeah.
but I love this stuff. So, all right, so let's talk about your origin story. Why are you even interested in this? I know that in your family, in your neighborhood, and among the people you know, there would not have been a whole lot of people, my guess, that would have been software developers or programmers or people who wanted to make the computer do things. For me, that was the case, and for most people that I know, that is the case. In general, people, it's not a thing that everybody aspires to,
Yeah.
but you did get into that. And so the question is, when did you start? When did you write your first program? And what inspired you? Why were you ever interested in this?
You know, I sort of describe my interest in programming as like more of a calling than a choice, right? Which makes it sound very, reverent, right? It's like I have a holy command. I'm on a mission from God to write all the code. Yeah, but but that's really kind of how it was. I have I was very fortunate that at a young age I knew what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I know it took me a long time to realize that was unusual. I remember being I remember the moment where I made the decision. Well, not the moment. I was in the fifth grade. I was like 11, 10 or 11, however old you are when you're in the fifth grade. And I'm like, I'm going to be a computer programmer when I grow up. And then I pursued that. It was, and so it wasn't, the interest is deep and old. As a kid, I found I was always interested in science and geeky stuff and space and technology and that sort of stuff. The sort of the standard, in some ways, the standard nerd upbringing. Um, but not the standard nerd upbringing in the upbringing sense, but in just sort of the origin story of geeky kid likes geeky things, right? That's sort of my origin story. But I found a book that I wish I could remember the author's name. I'm sure she's long gone, honestly. Um, Called It's Basic. I think her name was Shelley something or other. I've got a scan of the cover of it that I found online. It's called It's Basic, and it showed how to write computer programs.
In the
And
basic programming
it
language?
was line number basic. So this is like 1982, right? um, and so it's line number basic. 10 print guy, 20 go to 10, right?
Yeah,
That kind of stuff.
I did that.
A-
That's how I started.
Yeah, and I didn't have a computer, and we didn't have any computers in my school.
Mm.
The first computer that I ever wrote code on was a Commodore 64. It might have been a Commodore VIC-20 that I found in a Kmart that was on display hooked up to a TV for you to try it out.
Mm.
That was the very first place that I ever wrote code, was in a Kmart.
Wow.
And I would just, I poke it and make it do things. And then when I got into junior high school, we actually had computers in the library, and I spent a lot of time learning how those machines worked. But it was all, as a kid, it was all self-taught.
Mm.
Programming wasn't something you did on these little computers. Like professional programming was COBOL, and it was on mainframes, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this point in time. And but that wasn't what I was learning. I was learning all this other stuff. I think at the time, if I had known anyone that coded and gotten advice from them, it would not been good advice, because they would have been looking at it from a current business model lens of what real programming is. And I basically learned on toys. Right? It's kind of what these computers were. I mean, they were real computers. You could program them, but not a lot of people were doing business on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were toy computers for kids to learn to code on, but they were the foundation that then led to all the other things that I learned. It was the very beginning, starting out there in line number basic.
Yeah, it was
Eh,
accessible, and that's how funny. That's how I started. And when I
Yeah,
started, I started on GW Basic, and I didn't have a computer either. So
yeah.
I used to code on a notebook.
I did the same thing in graph paper on graph paper, so that it would all be fixed with columns. Actually,
uh,
the guys in the prison did similar stuff.
oh, nice.
When the computers got taken away, they wanted to keep coding, and so they would read the books and write out code on paper and to test out the ideas that they had. So
That's the one of the best ways to learn. So then
yeah,
you get to get the chance to execute your code mentally. Okay, what happens next? And what happens next? And I think it would be for simple programs, the types of things that I used to do. That's really awesome. Okay, so you were interested in fifth grade, which is pretty early,
yeah, it is.
and you said, okay, I just want to be a programmer, or I want to do computer programming because it's fun. You don't have the computer, and those days, you're talking about the Commodore 64. A lot of people don't know what that is. This is like a PlayStation, but
Yeah,
you can actually do programming in that because you had a keyboard, and you could actually uh, type in a game or something, right? In Basic or some whatever language. I think it uses Basic as a standard programming language, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you could just type it in. Maybe you could find it in a magazine, a program. You type it in as it is, and then it would do something, and then you can then play with it. I think a lot of people did that. But then,
yeah. It's a common story for us folks who are in their 40s and 50s that are
yeah.
writing software.
So what happens after that? You probably got the chance to get your own computer, probably another Commodore, or maybe you got a PC.
Actually, I didn't get my first computer until 1990.
So that was a long
So
time.
like 8 years later.
So
Right?
you actually used the one in your school, maybe the library, but you would have used an IBM PC. I'm guessing.
I started using an IBM PC. My first time I touched an IBM PC, I was a senior in high school. It was 1989.
Okay,
Uh,
so you
and
were using probably Commodore 64s the whole time.
yeah, yeah. So this I just used whatever was available at the schools,
Yeah.
and so I used the Commodore 64s, Commodore 128s.
Right. And then
When I went,
because the language
what,
was the same across, so you didn't have to
yeah.
actually learn a new platform right now.
Well,
So
when I went to the vocational school,
mm,
like most people, you go to college, right? You take your 4 years of college prep stuff, and then you go to college, right?
right.
And then you study your engineering, whatever, and then you graduate and you get a job. That's the path, right?
Path.
um, that's not what I did. I went to 2 years of high school, and then I said, I'm going to go to the vocational school and study electronics because this is cool. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to afford to go to college or not. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. And so I want to have a backup plan. I want to have a backup skill. And it's in the same field. It's related, right? But it was in some ways it was just drilling down to the next level on how computers work. I wanted to know how they worked, and so it's like, okay, well, I know how to program this thing, and I learned a little bit of machine language. And then I went to vocational school. We studied electronics, and so you started learning how the transistors worked, and how the memory worked, and how logic gates worked, and how to build adders, and all that lower level stuff. And we actually did programmed microcontrollers, programmed the same microprocessor as the Commodore 64 on a circuit board. And but going to the vocational school is not the college path generally. That's the I'm going to learn how to weld, and then I'm going to be a welder, which is a perfectly fine career.
Right.
Welders are doing quite well right now, actually. um, and so my teachers were aghast that I was not going to. It's like, but guy, you're the chosen one. You're gonna break the cycle of poverty and go off to college. And I'm like, well, but this is really cool, and I want to learn this. And this doesn't mean I can't go to school. It's just. And so then I went there and I got deeper into the tech, and I touched Apple computers there for the first time. I learned Pascal as part of like a high school college exchange at the local university. And I learned I actually touched an old TRS-80. We had an old one that had been donated to us, so I was playing with that. And then from there, I applied to college, and I ended up getting a scholarship to go to DeVry, and so I could afford school. And so there's a lot of luck, but there's also been in these things that happened. It's like I had a lot of luck, but I also had a lot of choices I made to steer in a particular direction that got me to DeVry. And then when I got to DeVry, I bought my first computer because I got my first credit card.
Of course.
So I bought a computer with it, and that made school a lot easier. And so I went through college at DeVry, and then got a job as a COBOL programmer when I graduated, the week I graduated from DeVry. And so it's, in a lot of ways, I've had it's a weird path, but in some ways it's a traditional path, but it's there's some lucky breaks in there, but there was also this is just what I set a long-term vision to say, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I'm like, I'm going to be a programmer. And so when I went to high school, I'm like, I'm going to take typing, because I'll need to know how to type to be a programmer, even though it was all manual typewriters, right? Not using computers at all. But I knew it would, and it transferred. And so there was lots of long-term choices that I made to get me to where I'm at. And so my mom actually tried to, sorry, Mom, if you're listening, she feels bad about this, but she actually tried to discourage me from going to college because she felt that there was no way I'd be able to pay for it. But I went anyhow, and it worked out, and I got a scholarship. And so that was very fortunate.
That's really awesome. So there are a couple of things here. One is that you did go to DeVry now, which is a kind of a non-traditional college.
Yeah.
And I think it focuses more on skills. Perhaps my guess is that it's
It's skills, not theory.
Right, and so it's still job focused, which is interesting. I know people who have studied at DeVry and they're excellent. I haven't found many people that went to that college and were not good. Right, that doesn't happen usually, in my experience. So my first question is, did that actually help you in your work to go through that 4 year of college?
Uh, the main thing I got two main things out of. Well, actually, I got three things. The main things that I can think of out of college at DeVry. Mm-hmm. One is I got a receipt, right? And so I say that with a little bit of jadedness, right? I got some sort of paper that said he's been through this thing, and therefore it's sort of like, especially I graduated in college in 1994. If you didn't have a degree in 1994, it was hard to get a job as a developer. I don't think we were even calling us developers. We were still just being called programmers back there. They didn't use the software developer term. That was like IT was called information technology. It was previously called information systems, and before that it was called data processing, and before that it was called accounting. But but this is like what people are still calling it data processing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And so my first job out of college, I had to wear a suit. Yeah, it's like I didn't know how to wear a suit. I grew up in a trailer park. I didn't know anyone that wore suits. Yeah.
If you go to a job wearing a suit, I don't know. I think you'll be laughed out of the building.
Yeah, I don't even. I think I own one tie. Yeah. I do have a suit jacket.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. But
yeah,
the world.
I mean, I'm wearing. This is what I normally wear to work. Well, this is where I work, so
Okay.
No one cares what I wear. But yeah. Sorry, I lost the thread of what question I was answering. I got too many distractions there.
I interrupted you. Sorry about that. So you went in there wearing a suit to your job interview, I guess.
Yeah. I had a few interviews. The nice thing that was happening there, and I think this was a cool thing that happened in that time period, and I feel like it doesn't happen as much as it used to, and I think this is actually really a shame, is that the people that were interviewing, they would go to DeVry and say, we want to hire a couple new grads. We're looking for new people, and so there's sort of this ethic of let's get some developers that are green and bring them in and teach them how to work. And I think you see less of that than you used to,
Yeah.
which I think is, I think it's incredibly foolish of industry because um, if everyone must have at least 5 years of experience at your company, then eventually you won't. Gosh, why are you having trouble finding people to hire? Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, not all companies do that, but that is a pattern I've seen, and
That
I'm
is a
sure that
pattern.
people watching this podcast are saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, he's right, he's right." um,
Yeah, everybody entry level job with 2 year experience. That's a pretty common thing.
yeah,
Even for
yeah,
interns, they want experience.
yeah, and they were specifically looking for someone that was just right out of college, and I actually had a couple different interviews when I was at DeVry. DeVry had a good placement program. I know a lot of the boot camps have those sorts of
Right.
placement programs as well. Um, but I got a job my last week of school, and then I took a week off and went on a vacation, and then I started my job.
That's
And so,
incredible. So a lot of people listening or watching right now, they're like, hey, how did he do it? How did I do it? Like they're going through, maybe they're in their senior year in college and they're like, I don't have any job offers. Did you have to do in some internship before? Did you apply a year ahead of time? How did you manage that?
I didn't do any internships. There were people that did those, and they all had very positive experiences with those. I actually worked as a TA at the university,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I think that helped some because it was it's like, okay, I'm not only am I learning this stuff, but then I'm turning around and I'm teaching and tutoring it.
Right.
And so when you see someone's got that on their resume, that helps. It's like if you can teach the thing, then you have to know the thing. And by teaching the thing, you learn it better. That's an old adage is you want to learn something really well,
Mm-hmm.
teach it. And so I think that helped. I did extracurricular stuff too. And I actually the job I got, they told me afterwards one of the reasons they hired me um, was because they said when you get a bunch of new hires or a bunch of greenhorns out of school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their resumes all look the same. Right. I'm green. I went to school here. Please hire me. Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it looks. And so, and I think this is a useful nugget for people who are watching. Um, I had things that made it stand out and separate me from the crowd.
Mm.
So not only was a TA, which I think helped,
Right.
or if you had an internship, that would help, obviously. But I had run a computer bulletin board.
Mm.
And so this was back in the dial-up internet
Mm.
days, pre-internet, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the internet existed, but it wasn't mainstream.
Right.
Um,
We're talking about
where,
a bulletin board service, a BBS. So you were
yeah,
running a BBS. People would dial in using
yep,
their regular telephone lines, which is a thing that a lot of people may not know what it is anymore. But used to be that we used to be able to need to talk to people using actual cables.
yeah, yeah,
Because my kids have no idea that such a phone exists. But okay.
yeah.
So
Well, so I
you were
ran that,
running
and
a BBS, and that actually a BBS is a place where people could share files and talk to each other and all that. So is
it's
that
kind of like a forum today,
right?
like a web
It's
forum.
like a
Only,
forum,
only, only it was only local people because they had to dial in, and they
right?
didn't want to pay long distance to call and dial into boards that were far away. Because long distance, you're talking like 7 cents a minute.
Right,
You
right.
spend half an hour on there, and all of a sudden,
And while
you
you're
know,
connected to
in
the
1993 dollars, that's a
eh,
lot of money.
and while you're connected to the BBS, you're nobody can get a call. So your mom's yelling at you. You're holding up the phone. And
Yeah. Well, and there wasn't call waiting yet either, so there wasn't a they couldn't beep in, right? It was just people would
right.
get a busy signal. Uh, but yeah, so I ran this bulletin board for several years, and I had built up about 500 users in the Columbus metro area,
Wow,
and
that's huge.
so I put that on my resume because it's like, well, this is a related thing that I did, and
Yeah.
the woman who one of the women who interviewed me, she said that that was one of the reasons why they hired me and why they looked at my resume in the first place was because it was. She specifically said all these resumes look alike because they're all just new grads,
Right.
and usually it's went to college, worked at Arby's, right? That tends to be how these resumes look. Yours had this extra thing on there, this extracurricular activity that was technically related, that gave said, well, let's talk to this guy because he's, pun not intended, uh, because
Because it shows that you, first of all, you took initiative, but you're managing something technical. It's a
yeah,
technical thing. You're configuring software at least, so that's great.
yeah.
So
So
that's
I
why
think that helped a lot. So
that's how it helped you get a job. But the job itself was doing COBOL. I'm not
yes, it
sure
was.
how exciting that was, but it was a job, and you
You
got
know what was
paid.
really exciting
What?
was getting the biggest paycheck I'd ever gotten in my life.
Yes, exactly.
That was really exciting.
Um, getting a good amount of money and right out of college, and and you probably didn't have to get a get a student loan because you had a scholarship. That's wonderful.
Actually, I did have student loans.
You did, okay,
I had a half tuition scholarship. It wasn't a full
okay.
tuition scholarship.
So
Uh,
that's good. It's
no,
good
I
to
actually
have
came out
a
of college with about $30,000 in student loan debt in 1994.
yeah. That's a
So
lot. That is a
that
lot.
was a lot. Yeah.
But there are a lot of kids right now that are going into even more debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they want to go to this particular college and maybe it's out of state or maybe it's private college, and they think getting that degree will give them a leg up and it's worth the investment. Obviously, that's why people do it.
Yeah.
At least if you are interested in becoming a software engineer, a software developer, or work in this computer industry, I'm not entirely sure that's a wise investment. But personally, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't spend
Yeah.
$100,000 to get a degree from college A where I could do it for 30,000 from college B. I'll probably go to college B because there's
Well,
it's not going to translate into income at least.
5 years into my career, no one cared about what college I went to.
Yeah, and nobody asks you, right?
Yeah. No one. I mean, at that point, people still cared about whether I had a degree or not,
Right.
but they didn't care where it was from. Got a bachelor's? We're good.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of
I don't
times
think
they
they
don't
even
even
cared that it was
care.
in programming.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter if you have a computer science degree per se. It's they just want to know if you finished college. A lot of people have this checkbox that they have to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you did college, check. So it's just like a gatekeeper will tell you, you need a college degree to get through the gate. But the person hiring you, the manager that needs a person on their team, they don't care.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asked me.
But when I interview people, I care about three things.
Yes.
Can you do the thing? Will you do the thing? And do you play well with others? Those are the three things I care about.
That's amazing.
Um,
Because
well,
that's not
that's the
what people
job,
are
right?
thinking. The people listening to you right now, I guarantee you that a lot of them they're surprised by that answer. So please elaborate a little bit. So I want people to realize how meritorious or meritocratic, if that's the word,
It
this
is now.
software thing
Yeah.
is. If you are good and you could prove that you are good and you want to work in that team, people will look at you, right? So
Yeah.
please explain.
So yeah. So I'll restate the three things. Can you do the thing? It means do you have the skills? But it's really more. It's more. Do you have the aptitude?
Right.
So one of the things I say is rent skill, hire talent. So if I'm going to bring someone onto my team, I want someone that's can think. I want someone that's I don't want someone that's just memorized Java,
Right.
right? I want someone that knows Java, can do Java. Memorizing is not a terrible thing to have done, um, but is able to apply their skill to other things. So it's that the general technical skill, not the specific technical skill, that I tend to want. I'm unconventional in that I tend to favor generalists,
Mm.
because if you get someone that's a technical generalist, then you're just more nimble as an organization,
That's right.
right? It's like you get someone that's like, oh, they can do that. There's that jack of all trades, master of none statement, but there's a second part to that statement that they never say.
What is
It's
it?
the full thing is jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than master of one.
Oh,
Right? So it's
that's
a
what it is. Nobody ever told me.
yeah. So it's a compliment actually. Right? Um, But so I tend to look for those kinds of people. That's me. Some companies are looking for skills. They just want a specific skill. But I've gotten a lot of value out of being a generalist in my career. I've been able to hop to a lot of different jobs, and I didn't get stuck as a COBOL programmer. I went from COBOL to C++, which is perhaps the most radical shift that anyone has ever done in a career in the history of all humanity, probably. Yeah. And so, but can you do the thing, right? Do you have the skills? Do you have the aptitude? Um, do you, and I use that term skill loosely in that thing. Can you do the thing? I need you to write code and solve my technical problems. Can you do that? Great. Check one. Right. Um, the next one is will you do the thing? That's a personal attribute. Are you a reliable person? You gonna show up? Right. Right. Lots of times the recruiters can weed those people out before you get to that step, right? Job history tends to show that, those sorts of things. But will you do the thing is a measure of just what's your work ethic like? Is it okay? Is it bad? Is it good? I don't know that I have a lot of elaboration on that particular point. I think it's pretty clear, honestly. Right. These are things about all jobs. If I was hiring someone to work in a fast food place, can you do the thing? Well, most people can do the thing at a fast food restaurant. Yeah. Will you do the thing? Okay, well, are you going to show up? Can I put you on a schedule and have you be here? And then the plays well with others. You might be a genius and you might be super reliable, but if you're a jerk, no one's going to want to work with you. Life's too short for talented a-holes, right? You just don't want to. Yes, you get someone that's very talented and capable, and really diligent. They can do a lot, but they can also damage a lot of teams. And so those are the things I look for when I'm interviewing. Can you do the thing? Will you do the thing? Do you play well with others? And I think they're in reverse order. Okay. Like, the first one I said, I think is the least important. I think the most important thing is, do you play well with others? And then the next most important thing is, are you reliable? Right. And then, do you have the technical skills? Okay. Because if you got the aptitude, but you don't have specific skills, you can learn.
That's the key here. I think that for people who have not been exposed to software development as a discipline, and who don't go to meetups, don't meet other people, and I meet a lot of people like that. They think they have to get permission from somebody. They have to go to a 4-year college, or somebody has to certify them in order for them to make themselves eligible for programming, software development, a job. If they want to do some data science or something else, they need a credential. But what you're describing is perfect, because a lot of times in the industry, we know we can teach you, or you can teach yourself the skills, because that is not that hard, and it takes many years to be good at something, but it's not very hard to get started and be productive.
Yeah.
But what's very hard to find are people who are able to learn, who are reliable, as you're saying, who will actually persist, and you can depend on them. That's really what it is. It's common sense. It's human nature. But it's one of the few industries where you don't really need a credential. You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
In any other form of engineering, even, or other medical science or other kind of sciences. You couldn't do that. But you can do that.
In all fairness, in the case of like structural engineering or say heart surgery, the stakes are a little bit higher.
Sometimes there's stakes. You're absolutely right. The stakes are sometimes high in software too. I've actually
I shut down a warehouse once
where some very serious software is being made by people who don't know what they're doing. So I've seen that. But so there's some cautionary tales there. However, you could do it. People will hire you to build a very critical financial application if they think you will grow with the team. They'll hire you, and
Yeah.
you'll get it foot in the door. You couldn't do that at any other place. So that's very good. So now we know that a way to get into the industry is to have the right attitude, to have the skills, but not really be solely focused on one skill, and necessarily be want to be the expert in that one thing, because the landscape changes, the sands shift, right? You might be very good at something, and that thing may not be a cool thing anymore, or you may have a great job in a great company with great people with using something different. But if you're not wedded
Well,
to a technology, that's okay. They'll probably hire you, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, and I mean, how many times have you been at work and you didn't know what you were doing? Right. Hey, could you do this thing? Yeah, I can figure it out. I mean, the job isn't actually knowing how to code. Like, it isn't knowing how to use the tech. It's knowing how to figure out tech. That's I'm going to use a new JavaScript framework, um, and I haven't used it before, but I can be productive because I can figure it out.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it. And so, yeah, you remember back during Y2K, everyone was terrified that like gas lines were going to explode and airplanes were going to fall to the sky,
Yeah.
because everyone's on an airplane on New Year's Eve at midnight. But but that was the feeling.
Right.
Um, I wasn't that worried because I think the rest of the world doesn't realize how often software engineers don't know what they're doing, and the rest of the world doesn't realize how often software fails.
Right.
It's like at the time I worked for. Oh no, I didn't work there yet. A friend of mine worked for a large insurance company, and I started working there a few months later. And he had to stay on the on he had to be at the office in case anything broke during the annual batch runs, because they would run batch processes every year, or for like yearly policy renewals and that kind of stuff. And everyone's like, oh, it's going to fail, it's going to fail. It's like, well, no, this stuff fails all the time. That's why we have people on call, right? This is just, these things fail a lot. That's not unusual. Now, do you want that to happen? Well, of course not. As a developer, you want to make software that doesn't fail, but it's going to happen. I mentioned it in passing. I shut down an entire warehouse because we deployed code, and all of the packages that were being routed to West Virginia would not get routed there. They were backing up on the line, and they clogged up the entire package line, whatever. I can't remember what you call it. It's not the assembly line, but in the warehouse. And and I'd been writing software for 15 years at that point. Right?
Yeah, we're human. We make mistakes, overlook
Yeah.
things, and all of us have been through that. It's a horrible feeling, but we get past it. Okay, so now wrapping up, let's talk about where you are now. What do you do now? And you started your journey. We kind of understood a little bit of this, and you would have changed jobs over time. You would have worked in different technologies, different languages and frameworks, and that's just part of
Yeah.
normal work life. But now you are more mature. You are at a very different stage in your life. What are you doing these days? And do you see young people, new developers in your organization or where you work? And do you see them struggling? Or do you have anything that you see that they could do this, they could do this or that, a few pointers for them to just improve their chances of success?
Well, I'm at Redis Labs now, and most of my career I've spent at businesses that had technology needs. So I worked for an insurance company. I worked for a financial services company. Um, and I worked in consulting several times. And in the local area here, consulting means go help the power company build this software. Go help this retail distributor do these things. Go help this library service do. You're you're building software for companies that have a different business purpose. We sell insurance. We all those other examples. We sell clothes. We sell shoes. Whatever it is, right? Um, well, I work for a technology company now, and that's very different. It's actually kind of new for me. Um, and I'm in a interesting role in Redis Labs because I'm not a developer anymore. I've transitioned my career over the last 5 years to developer advocacy or developer relations. And so a lot of what I do is content creation, video creation, public speaking. I go to conferences and talk about technology, and specifically talk about Redis technology. Uh, and so I'm not a day-to-day coder anymore. I'm writing sample code now instead of building actual production applications, which is very different. And a technology company has a very different focus as well, because it's all about building the product. And in our case, we have a product that's internal, but then we have the open source product as well. And the open source product is done in its own idiom. And then there's an internal enterprise version of that. And so I don't really have a great answer to your question, because I don't interact with the developers hardly at all. I work on some of the development staff, but most of them are overseas. I don't see them on a regular basis.
Let me ask you another question.
Yeah, so maybe we could come at this at a slightly different angle. I was gonna pull back to
Right.
when I was at Pillar.
So
I used to work.
you've moved to an advocacy position, and you're now, you're telling other developers about your products and so on. But how does someone become you, right? Let's say someone's out there, they're thinking, I want that job. I don't want to work on production code. I wanted to talk to developers. I want to be a developer advocate, and I just want to talk technology and make apps and do demos. How do they do that? How do they get
So you start doing it, which is oftentimes the most unhelpful advice in the world. Just do it. But what I mean is you don't need permission to go out and do those things. Just like you don't need the permission to be a developer, you don't need permission to be a developer advocate. You can just start going out to events and say, hey, I want to speak. And you can start making YouTube videos and say, hey, I want to make videos on how to do this code thing. Or you can start streaming, live code, or you can start a podcast. Right? And you can just go out and do that. That is how I found myself in this career. I was speaking at events, and I was running a user group, and just building community and going out and talking and just going out and teaching, basically, which has sort of been a theme my entire life. I mean, when I was in college, I was a TA. I was helping teach and tutor, and throughout my career, I find myself teaching other people all the time, and it helps you. Like I said at the very beginning, it's like that teaching is the best way to learn. And so when you have to get in front of everyone and talk about a thing, you want to make sure you know what you're talking about. And so that drives you to learn more. But if you start doing it, then people will take notice. In my case, I wasn't looking to be a developer advocate. The job came to me.
Right.
But it was a result of years of speaking at events and running a meetup and being active on social media and technically speaking in social media, not just cat memes on Facebook, but
so speaking
so,
is important.
Yeah.
So let's take
it's not the only thing,
right? It's not the only thing. Obviously, you need competency, you need curiosity, you need to be able to tinker with things, do little small projects, and demonstrate technology and all that. That's all good stuff. And
it's a great thing for me, actually, because I'm a very extroverted person, which is atypical for developers.
Which is highly atypical.
I'm in many ways not a typical developer at all. And so the developer advocacy role allows me to get out and be extroverted and still be technical. And so it's a particularly nice role for if you have that sort of temperament. It's a way to channel it.
So if you're out there and you're thinking, well, I'm really good with people, I like to talk to people, you could do that, start speaking. So finally, before we go, I just want one tip that you can give to new developers who are just starting out. And they're struggling. It's a lot of stress at work. I see that all the time. A new developer, especially if they are kind of underrepresented
Yeah.
segments of society, they really struggle, and they struggle silently. So, anything you want to say to help them, or any pointers you have for people like that?
Well, a couple things that come to mind. One is this too shall pass.
Mm.
This is not permanent. This is temporary. And so, you know, you're green. You don't know that much, and you feel like you're a fraud. Uh, but everyone knows you're green. They actually know you don't know anything. Uh, right? You know, it's okay, right? Um, it's okay to. I mean, it's imposter syndrome, right? We've all heard about imposter syndrome, or that idea that everyone feels like they're an imposter. I get up on stage and give talks, and I feel like I'm a fraud. And I've been doing this for 25 years. And so, if you feel like that, that's normal. Uh, don't let it bother you. Know that if it's particularly difficult because you're green and you're just like, I feel like I can't contribute. I feel like I can't get anything going forward. That's not permanent. There'll be a point where you are contributing meaningfully to the team. It won't be such a struggle. You'll still feel like everyone's smarter than you, but that's normal. That's how it always feels. We are constantly judging what we see everyone's outsides against our insides, and so it makes us feel like we're not adequate. That's why things like pair programming are so awkward, or they have the potential to be awkward. Why people are reluctant to do it. It's like, well, if I sit and code with this person, they're going to know that I don't know these things. Well, you also learn that there's lots of things they don't know too. So, um, you're not a fraud. Um, you'll get there eventually. The learning path is starting is more important than anything else. Right. If you start and then you fail, then that just means you've learned a thing. Okay, don't go down that path. Okay, let's try this one. Right. Learning where to go and what to do is part of the process and is progress. It is forward progress. So that's a lot of advice sort of bundled together in sort of a chaotic way. Hopefully it's useful for folks, but that's what I got.
That's awesome. So if I want to say it in my words, I'd say persevere, don't give up, because the instinct is it is hard, maybe I'm not cut out for it, I'll quit. So if you don't quit, take a deep breath, take a break, come back, don't quit, and you'll get through this, because we've all been there.
Yeah. Right? Stay on target, use the force. Yeah. Or use the source, I guess. Womp, womp, womp.
or go to Stack Overflow.
If anyone else wants any other dad jokes, you can find me at guyroyce.com.
Yeah, so how can people get in touch with you, Guy? Because you have a Twitch show, and I'd love for people to know about it and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, honestly, for the most part, if you just type my name into Google, you will find me. So I've got a YouTube channel where I put my Twitch streams. I stream on Twitch not as often as I'd like to, but I'm going to try and get back into it this year. As it's New Year's now, so that's New Year's resolution is to stream more. Mm-hmm. And so if you just type Guy Royse into Google, you can even spell my last name wrong; it will still find me because no one else has my name. But if you go to guyroyce.com, you'll find links to Twitch and to YouTube and to LinkedIn and Twitter and all those things. So, yeah, feel free to connect with me on social media. Give me a follow. Give me, watch some of my videos. Tell me I'm awesome. Massage my. Tell me I'm qualified, because I need to soothe my imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah. We all need to feel good about where we are. It's always good to know that someone appreciates what we're doing. So go ahead, everybody, follow Guy in all his social media and watch his Twitch streams. And we're going to have all of those links that he's talking about and anything else that he'd like to share. They will be on the website, and they will also be on the description of this video. The website's going to be mentoringdevelopers.com/episode, and the name of the episode, I believe this is going to be 92. So if that's the case, it will be /episode 92. All the links will be there. We'll see if we can have some show notes there for you. And if you want to talk to us and let us know on this podcast, or you want me to send a message to Guy, and if you don't know how to find him, send me an email at us@mentoringdevelopers.com. And I really like to get those emails, and I've really been happy to see that this podcast has helped a lot of people. And I've also done one-on-one coaching with people sometimes. Whatever your problems are, or whatever you are in your journey, if you just want to share it, or if you want advice, you can always email me privately, and we can see what we can do. So us@mentoringdevelopers.com. It was so much fun to have you, Guy.
Thanks. It was fun to be on.
That is, and there's so much to talk about. There's a whole lot of things that we didn't get a chance to get into. We have been recording this for over an hour.
So wow.
we have to wrap it up for today, but maybe if we get a chance, we'll get you on next time, and we'll talk about something a little bit, about your process and some of the other things you're doing. Okay?
That'd be great.
That's awesome. Okay, everybody, and tune in and send in your comments. Bye for now.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.